The guitar has a long association with simple, down-to-earth music. There's a common trope of 3 chords and the truth, which could be meant derisively, like any dum-dum can play the guitar.
It's okay if you only know 3 chords, but God, put them in the right order.
Or it could be more like all you need is 3 chords to express something authentic.
3 chords and the truth.
But either way, it's quintessentially about the guitar. It's kind of hard to make 3-chord jokes about keyboard players because we mostly imagine that keyboard players started off as piano students, and that makes us think of fancy smart people doing serious things like using metronomes and sheet music. The guitar is at the center of just about every "it's cool because it's simple" era of pop music. Blues, folk, rock and roll, country, punk, grunge. For me, growing up in the early 90s, there was a kind of ratification of the electric guitar that made it seem like just about anybody could pick this thing up and rock.
Hey man, the dance is over, unless you know somebody else that can play the guitar.
Characters like Bill and Ted and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles don't exactly ooze academia. One of my biggest guitar heroes was Kurt Cobain, and he could barely play the guitar at all. And then of course came Guitar Hero, which has as much to do with playing the guitar as Duck Hunt has with hunting ducks, but nonetheless gives off the impression that learning to play the guitar is as fun and instantly gratifying as playing video games. All of which is to say, for an instrument that's supposed to be simple, down to earth, one might even say easy, it turns out the guitar is hard. The guitar's fretboard is a confusing matrix. You think, hey, it'd be cool to learn the guitar, just jam on a sweet tune with my buds. But 3 seconds into your first guitar lesson and it feels less like a chill good time and more like the world's worst game of Battleship. Okay, I just put my 3rd finger on the 3rd fret of the 5th string. Only 4 more notes to go to play literally 1 chord.
This ain't my battleship!
There are so many numbers involved in even the most basic guitar playing. There's 6 strings, there's 20 or more frets, which literally get smaller as if disappearing into the distance. Your left hand fingers get numbered, and depending on the style of music, your right hand fingers might get numbered too. That's another confusing thing right there. I just said left and right, but that actually depends on your dominant hand. Guitar is one of the few instruments where left-handed and right-handed people actually play it differently. So even talking about left and right hand can be misleading, and you have to use awkward phrases like fretting hand or strumming hand. And unlike pretty much every other instrument where there's only really one way to play every note, on the guitar you can play the same note in many places. For example, I can play this exact same E note on all 6 strings. Oh, you want to learn hot cross buns on piano? Great, here's your 3-second lesson. You want to learn hot cross buns on guitar? Here's all the ways you could finger that. Okay, so let's break down what's going on with this matrix. Let's simplify things and think about a guitar that only has 1 string. So in this situation, we can equate this 1-stringed guitar to a piano. Assuming we're in the world of 12-tone equal-tempered music, which is most of the music played on pianos and guitars, each key represents 1 half step, with 12 keys being an octave. On the 1-string guitar, each fret is also a half step, with 12 frets being an octave. Oh yeah, there's another tricky thing. The first note you play is not on a fret at all, it's actually just open, meaning you just pluck the string and don't do anything else. From then on, you have to use your fretting hand to sort of mash a finger down into the right general area and hope the note comes out pretty. Okay, so each fret is a half step, but how do you keep track of all the frets? I mean, I'm glad there's only 1 string, but still, look at all those frets. What do? Just count them? Well, fortunately, your guitar's fretboard probably has some dots on it. In fact, I have a personal bone to pick with this one. When I was taking classical guitar lessons in college, having only previously played electric guitar, I was sometimes not able to keep track of what fret I was on because classical guitars don't usually have dots marking the frets. And my classical guitar teacher made fun of me for needing the dots. And I thought, and still think, that's pretty elitist. After all, pianos have black and white keys. Not only do the black keys look different, they actually feel different too. Imagine trying to play a piano that was just an endless row of white keys. It would be impossible. I don't see any benefit in leaving off the dots. It doesn't add any musicality and it just makes it harder. Okay, so we have the dots. We approve of the dots. But also, which notes have the dots and why? Yeah, I wish there was a really clear answer for this. On piano, the black keys are all the notes that are sharp or flat. So if you want to play a C major scale, you just keep playing the white keys. I mean, a toddler could do this. On guitar, it's a little bit weirder, and this is how we get thrust so quickly into the world of numbers. If the guitar were only a one-stringed instrument, then the dots could tell you specific note names, just like on a piano. The problem is, and I hate to be a buzzkill, but the guitar has more than one string. Oh man. It is in fact
a matrix of strings, 6, sometimes even more, and each one tuned differently.
Well, actually the first and the sixth strings are usually tuned the same, so let's just say
5 differently tuned strings.
But seriously, that's like having 5 differently tuned pianos all stacked on top of each other. So the dots can't tell you note names because it's different for each string. The only realistic way for the dots to be helpful is as a numbering system in and of itself. Most guitars have dots on frets 3, 5, 7, 9, and a double dot on 12, although there can be some variation on some of those dot choices. In general, all the dots can do is help you keep track of what number you're on and keep you from veering off the path. It's kind of like what you might do on a spreadsheet, alternating gray and white rows just to help you keep track of your place in a stupidly long list. There is actually some logic to the dot placement. The 12th fret is an important fret because it's where the octave is, and the 5th and 7th frets are also meaningful because that's where the perfect 4th and perfect 5th are above the open string. Really, all the dots have some relationship to the Harmonic Series, although they don't line up perfectly because, as we all know, equal-temperament is a lie. Anyway, it's not like you're contemplating the Harmonic Series while you're playing the guitar, so let's be real, it's just to help you keep your place. Okay, so 5 differently tuned pianos stacked on top of each other with some dots just here and there. How do you keep track of all these notes? Basically, the answer to that is you mostly just forget about note names and focus more on shapes. I think this is why guitar players can sometimes get pegged as being kind of dumb. We tend to think less academically. We have riffs or licks that we know will work. We have things like the box pattern for learning scales, the caged system that relates everything back to open chords. Sometimes it really is just easier to say, hey, just put that finger on that fret and don't think about it. But that's because we have to find some way to deal with this matrix of notes. We have to come up with our own alternative ways of approaching the instrument, and it mostly has to do with intervals, the relationships between the notes. That's how you start to make sense of this thing. For example, each string is tuned a perfect 4th higher than the previous string. So starting on the lowest string, going up 1 fret at a time, once you get to the 5th fret, that's the exact same note as the next open string. So from then on, they line up perfectly, just at a distance of 5 frets. Well, that is until you get to the 2nd string, because just when you thought this thing was confusing enough, we're going to add one more layer of confusion. The strings are tuned a perfect 4th away from each other, except for the 3rd and 2nd strings, which are a major 3rd apart. So just take everything you learned here and adjust it by 1 fret here. Neat. Cool, really happy about that. But on the plus side, by doing that one adjustment, we end up with the 1st and 6th strings both being tuned to the same note. So that can help you anchor yourself mentally. For example, if you're in the key of G, you can think of this 3rd fret, where you have a G on both the highest and lowest strings, as being your sort of anchor fret, with all the other notes positioned around it. Okay, that's actually pretty helpful. There is one more thing. That's just standard tuning. You can also play in alternate tunings, which means a lot of what you just learned about the guitar goes right out the window and you have to learn brand new shapes. The most common non-standard tuning is drop D, which is where you just tune the lowest string down a whole step. So that doesn't affect the rest of the strings, fortunately. But there are also so-called open tunings where several of the strings are tuned differently in order to give you a nice pretty chord just by playing them all open. As opposed to this garbage. That kind of seems like a better system. Yeah, well, the downside is instead of just having that one awkward tuning in an otherwise logical system, you have basically random tuning, which just makes it even more confusing to navigate around the fretboard. Overall, however you choose to tune this thing, there will be drawbacks because, as I may have mentioned before, the guitar's fretboard is a confusing matrix. One of the first things people learn when they pick up the guitar for the first time is, it freaking hurts to play. The guitar literally punishes you for trying to learn it. In order to play a note, you have to press your soft, vulnerable fingertip firmly into a taut steel wire so thin it's described in thousandths of an inch. And for the first 5,000 times you do so, instead of getting a beautiful note like this, you will inevitably get something more like this. That's because you can't just place your finger anywhere inside the fret area, you have to place it perfectly in just the right spot, hugged right up to the metal fret. On the plus side, your fingertips will eventually develop hard calluses which will allow you to play the guitar without feeling as much pain in your fingers. You will, however, feel the pain in your heart for years to come. Of course, this is only half the battle, because unlike a piano, which is just a series of buttons so supple you could basically fall and accidentally play it, the guitar requires both hands to work simultaneously together just to get one note out. As you are fretting so carefully with the one hand, the other hand has to pluck just the right string. Not that one. No, not that one either. Yep, there it is. Now, as you try to play more than one note at the same time, aka chords, these difficulties only multiply. That. Which is kind of weird because the guitar is mainly known for playing chords, just a chill instrument to strum away on a simple chord progression. But chords are hard, even the easy ones. Almost all of them require you to avoid hitting certain strings or use some of your fingers to mute some of the strings. Some of them call for barring, which is where instead of using your fingertip, you actually flatten your finger across multiple strings. That alone is hard, but then you also have to keep your other fingers curved so that they can do their normal non-bar things. The only thing harder than playing several notes at the same time is playing several notes one at a time. That's because, as we just discussed, both hands have to sync up together perfectly. So to play this on a guitar, you have to place each finger in the exact right spot on the fretboard and at the exact same time pluck the right string. If they're not in sync, it won't really sound very good. And that's just for notes on the same string. Once you get into changing strings, things get even trickier. Now, one thing you don't often hear is that playing the guitar doesn't actually require that much muscle. Yes, at first it feels like you have to use every ounce of energy just to get one note out, but that's not because you're not strong enough. That's happening for 3 reasons. One is that you don't have calluses yet. The calluses don't just help with pain, they also provide a harder, better surface to push against the string. So once you have the calluses, it's both less painful and actually easier. The second reason is that, more than likely, your guitar is not doing you any favors. Especially if it's a cheap guitar, and especially if it's an acoustic guitar, it's probably harder to play than necessary. So get something decent and get it set up by a professional to give yourself the best shot at success. But the third and most important reason the guitar seems so physically difficult at first is that you aren't using your muscles correctly yet. I know the guitar seems like a manly instrument, it's your axe, you're gonna shred, but honestly, playing it is surprisingly delicate. The ideal hand position is one in which you're using as little pressure as possible. If that weren't the case, there's no way you could change chords quickly or shred super fast. You'd be too busy pressing and releasing and pressing and releasing your sweet, swole hand muscles. When I was first starting out, I thought you needed one of these hand strengthening devices to get good at the guitar. And there's a logic to that. Baseball players use a weighted bat to develop their strength. But again, you don't need strength to play the guitar. What you actually need is muscle memory about exactly how to place your fingers on the fretboard. Fortunately, there's a super cool advanced device that's the perfect tool for working on this. It's your guitar. Huh? It's just the guitar that you already have. Oh. So guitar doesn't require strength, but it does require quite a bit of detail in how you play it in order to get not just any sound, but a good sound. Unlike a piano, which is basically impossible to get a bad sound out of, guitar requires precise fretting and picking to get what we refer to as good tone. Part of the trouble is everyone's hands are different. Normally that wouldn't be such a big deal, but with guitar you're touching the very strings that are making the sounds, so even small differences are magnified. You might be double jointed, your fingers might be different lengths, you might have small hands. And good luck playing in tune. Even if your guitar is perfectly set up, there's always a certain amount of pushing and pulling on the strings that means it's never going to be quite right. And unlike a violin where a highly skilled musician can fine tune as they play, with guitar, you're stuck with frets, so you're only going to be able to play as in tune as those frets will allow. So, if the guitar is so frustrating, why on earth does anyone play it? Why do I play it? I guess it's because for every one of those weird, eccentric things that makes it a hard instrument to learn, there's a corresponding specialness that comes with that. The fact that you can play the same note in more than one place opens up the potential to do some cool things that most instruments can't do. Those open strings give the guitar some of its most characteristic sounds, from heavy riffs, to blues, to pretty chords that combine open strings with fretted notes. It's a very particular combination of a droning instrument and a non-droning instrument, just depending on how you choose to play it. I mentioned that the fretboard dots have something to do with the Harmonic Series. That's something pretty cool we get to do, harmonics. These are the ethereal sounds you get when you just touch the string in the right spot rather than actually pushing it down. And we can combine those sounds with fretted notes as well. You can even do pinch harmonics, which involve using your right hand to create the harmonic. The concept of using shapes to make music is actually pretty cool. A lot of what has entered the vernacular of guitar music is intrinsically connected to the physical act of playing it. And I think that's what you feel when you listen to a lot of that music. It really can't be played on any other instrument. One of the few ways in which the guitar is actually easier than some other instruments is that, for the most part, keys don't really matter. If you can play something in the key of G, you can play it just as well in the key of G flat. Just move all of your notes down one fret. So there you go. We get one. I actually like the fact that the guitar is more about intervals rather than specific note names. I feel like it's more natural, more musical that way. In fact, I use the visual reference of the guitar's fretboard to help me with my music theory, rather than relying on abstraction. And I find it really gratifying when I can make new connections mentally on the fretboard. Those alternate tunings might seem daunting, but they can also open up your ears to new sounds you wouldn't have found otherwise. You can just detune your guitar and experiment. You can even use detuning in the moment to make music. That's not something most instruments can do. As frustrating as it is from a learning perspective that there are multiple ways to approach the instrument, it also means that no two players are alike. You can get totally different tones out of the instrument just based on what part of the string you're playing on or what angle the pick is. Beyond that, there's a world of sounds available to you, from playing with a slide, to using a whammy bar, to the vast landscape of guitar pedals and amps. As hard as it is to learn chords, once you get that down, you really can just grab your guitar and play anywhere. There aren't that many instruments that can accompany a singer and be carried around on your back. Having to synchronize your hands is a bummer, but on the plus side, the separation of note choice and attack allows for a lot of expressiveness that's unique to the guitar. You can strum, you can pick all down, you can pick all up, you can finger pick, you can not pick and instead slur or slide. Having to physically touch the strings to play the instrument is painful at first, but eventually that intimacy is worth it. You have so much control over your notes. You can bend. You can use vibrato. 2 different kinds. You can do downright weird things like pick slides and tapping. Most of the time, I don't even care that playing in tune is hard. Some of my favorite Jimi Hendrix moments are when he's playing out of tune. In a way, I kind of like it. I feel like it adds a layer of humanity to the music. I think this physical connection, that expressiveness, is what makes the guitar the ultimate instrument of rock and roll. I mean, there is a reason why it's Guitar Hero, and as much as it's annoying to me that instant gratification kind of teaches students the wrong lesson, I do understand where it's coming from. I mean, the reason why I wanted to play music in the first place was because I loved guitar music. I loved guitar players. I thought playing guitar in a band was cool, and that pretty much hasn't changed. The truth is, I basically play guitar because I think it's cool. I know I went through a lot here. I wanted to make a video about all the weird, cool, frustrating things about the guitar, all in one video without going into too much detail about any of them. So leave a comment below and let me know which of these things you'd like me to expand upon, so I'll know what to make the next videos about. Also, I have a series specifically about rhythm, not just for guitarists, called Rhythmic Building Blocks. You can also sign up for my Patreon page, where I make a bunch of videos about improvising, recording yourself in Logic, songwriting, lots of different things. We also do live stream music hangs where you can ask questions directly. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.